AskReddit by Kageo Agam. Reddit, what's the scariest near-death experience you've ever had? My period almost killed me. Had a very long, very heavy period. Towards the 9-day mark I was bedridden. I tried to walk to the bathroom and fainted out of weakness. Busted my knee colon. Went to the ER and no one really took me seriously. I even overheard my nurse say, right outside my curtain, "I can't believe she's here for her period. I have people here who are actually sick." Blood tests came back. Turns out I had lost like half my blood and I needed a transfusion. I was basically bleeding to death. Never got a diagnosis. They put me on birth control and sent me home. The same thing happened to me when I was 13. I had my period for almost a month. Dr. kept telling my mom it was normal since it was my first time. I would bleed through everything. Going in 2 months too, my skin started turning yellow. Walked into the DR and they rushed me to the ER where I needed 4 blood transfusions. I feel you. I was I think 4, 5 YO and living in a war-torn country. When the bombing happens, we hide. When it stops we go out and do business as usual. On one such day, Mom and I were out and suddenly there were sirens, and in the moment you said cookie the streets were cleared. Everyone hid. We were left in the middle of the street not sure where to go. So my mom pulled me behind one building and we lay in a whole field of nettles. Mom covered my head with something. I could hear bombs hitting the roof of the building. Pieces of it were falling all over. I heard them but didn't see them. I was not afraid but more like I made peace that I was going to die. Then I saw a leaf caught in a cobweb and I asked my mom to fetch it for me. There was a spider there as well, so I was afraid to do it myself. My mom gave me the leaf. Poor spider ended up hanging from it. I watched it climb back up and resting. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I wish people could be better towards each other. I accidentally mixed some medications I shouldn't have. Yes, it was genuinely an accident, which is why it scared the shit out of me. I've never felt so terrified. My blood pressure plummeted to 70/45 by the time IMSA arrived and was rapidly dropping. It honest to God could feel my soul leaving my body. I was rushed to the ER where I hallucinated for hours. Scared the shit out of me. I had my blood pressure drop ridiculously low due to some medications as well, and that feeling of your soul leaving your body is accurate. I remember feeling like I was slipping into a dark but comfy tunnel and the world around me kept getting further and further away. Family was in a big accident when I was young. Before it happened my sister and I had an argument over who got to sit shotgun. She won the argument so I sat in the middle row, with no seatbelt. I woke up with the van on its roof and glass everywhere. My sister suffered pretty bad head lacerations and my dad died. Somehow I lived. Sorry to hear about your dad. I idiotically decided to go off alone in the desert and got lost. It was around noon so I couldn't really use the sun to navigate and was already dehydrated from a hangover. Everything looked the same in every direction and my only thought was, what have you done? Bro, never go hiking without a shitload of water. Bring 3x more than you think you need. I was home alone eating cheese. I sucked it down my throat and it stuck hard. As I was getting dizzy all I could think of was that my cat was gonna eat me if I died, and then I realized it wasn't fully blocked, and if I took a very slow breath I could have a chance to cough it up. I got it up and thanked my lucky stars. As a result, my kids aren't allowed choky foods while home alone. I'm terrified they'll choke with no one around. Was it Swiss cheese? In February I was in a car accident where we spun off the interstate and my side hit the ground and I thought I was going to die. That sounds really scary. I'm glad that you are still here. Overdosed on triple the lethal dose of muscle relaxants back 10 years ago. It was pretty wild. I remember taking the medications and drinking half of a bottle to chase. Then I woke up a week later in a hospital and fell on the ground because I couldn't walk anymore and my bedside nurse fell asleep. Apparently I went into cardiac arrest after having an insane seizure type reaction in the ambulance. I don't remember any of it though. Wow, so glad you made it. I gave birth and 10 minutes later my vitals were all over, blood pressure dropped, heart rate hit 233 and I blacked out. And this, ladies, is why you always have your child in a hospital, not at home. People need to finish their stories, yo. How were you all saved? Okay, to finish my story above, I didn't believe in calling the cops back then. So my friend and I ran for a while and then went to circle back BC. We had it in our heads that he'd be out of bullets or we could sneak up on him and fuck him up. When we got back to where the guy was that shot at us, cops were there. Guess someone else called or they were close by, and the guy's stuff was there, but he was gone. We got interviewed, watched them do some crime scene shit, but never heard anything else of it. Guess they either never found the guy. Ruptured ectopic pregnancy. I knew it had ruptured the moment I stepped out of the shower. It felt like knives inside of me. My husband rushed me to the ER. At the ER, they nearly sent me home because they couldn't find evidence of rupture. Thankfully, the OB-GYN on call swooped in the nick of time and got me rushed into emergency surgery at 3 AM. I had to be intubated for the surgery because there wasn't enough time to let me fast. When I woke up, everyone had very grave expressions on their faces. It was apparently a huge ectopic that they caught just as it was rupturing. Had they sent me home like they originally planned, I probably would have bled out and died in my sleep. What did they say do in their defense? Any consequences? It scares me that medicine is so lacking in typical female health issues. Lack of research. My wife and I went to NY Comic Con years ago. We went outside to find a street vendor and got some halal kebabs. I ended up choking on a piece of lamb. Completely blocked my airways so that I couldn't even make a sound. I did the sign for choking to my wife, but she froze. It was a crowded city street, but let me tell you, I've never felt so isolated in my life. Fortunately, the vendor noticed and did the Heimlich on me. Were you dressed as a comic book or some other character? IDKY, but I feel like my brain would be like, fuck my life, you're going to die dressed like Batman or Sailor Moon. I was a lab tech at an industrial waste disposal company. Was cleaning up the lab, started dumping a sample in the waste bin. Huge chemical reaction explosion, 19L waste container, about 6 inches from my face. Turns out someone hadn't properly labeled some waste made up of a mix of extremely strong acids, still unknown. So, I couldn't breathe. My face, neck, chest, eyes, and arms are burning. My gloves disintegrated. Fortunately, the other lab worker had clocked out, but hadn't left yet. Because I wasn't strong enough to pull the emergency shower switch. Still struggling with PTSD. Years ago, when I was a little asshole teenager, I was walking through downtown Houston with a friend when a homeless fella asked me for my Dr. Pepper. I told him to fuck himself. He responded by pulling out a pistol and unloaded the fucking thing at us. Luckily I had started running the second I saw him reaching for something. BC, he came damn close to hitting me and in the damn head. I still remember the way it sounded and felt 4 bullets to pass close by my head. Not something I'll ever forget. Wow, you just never know what a stranger might do. Bet you'll give the Dr. Pepper if a homeless guy ever asks you for it again. So sorry that happened. Glad you're okay. I was having a terrible time with my wife. I got in the car and drove towards the bridge that I had picked out to kill myself. I knew I didn't want to do it but couldn't see any other way out. Instead of turning left towards the bridge, I ended up turning right and going to the local hospital. I spent a few hours talking to the duty psych, which was helpful. Things are much better now. I got COVID right at the tail end of Delta in November 2021. Ended up spending 2 months in hospital, a month in ICU and almost 2 weeks intubated in a coma. Had the talk with my family that I probably wouldn't make it. If I had got ill before the retrovirals came out, I definitely would be dead. I had to learn to swallow, grip and walk again. I still have to walk using oxygen, and the CFS I have now means I'm very limited in what I can do day to day. I am, however, still alive. CFS sucks. It can really fuck with your mental health too. It makes sense because essentially you developed a disability overnight. Glad you made it. Swimming alone outside of our ebb, which was on the beach. I was pretty intoxicated and went out too deep. I felt the rip current was pulling me out to sea. I getting further and further from the house and thought to myself that I can't do anything. It's really scary when you're swimming but you're not moving the direction you want. For some reason I was able to break free. I remember after all that I swam up to a shore and lay flat on my stomach hugging the sand. I'm not sure if this is considered a near-death experience, but here we go. Story time. When I was 14, I had the flu, and it was going on 4 weeks, 2-3 weeks, and my dad kept on saying that it'll pass through. Well, it kept getting worse and worse, so he took me to the clinic, and they told me that I had a collapsed lung that was caused by the coughing. I also have asthma, so it didn't help either, yet the doctor told my dad to immediately take me to the hospital or else I would die. I was in the hospital for 3-4 weeks, and I was fine after that. I still have no idea what could have caused the collapsed lung. I bet your dad never doubted you again after that. Withdrawal from alcohol at 21. Sober 49 years now. Heroin withdrawal can feel like a very bad cold, but severe alcohol withdrawal will kill you. I fell off a ski lift once. It was my dad and I on the lift, and we had just raised the bar as we are approaching the end station to get off. All I did was try to adjust myself to be a bit more forward in the seat so I could get off easier, and the slippery seat sent me flying off. Since it was close to the station, it wasn't a certain death fall distance, but there were also jagged rocks all around the station. Fortunately I landed just short of them in a deep snowbank, and was totally unhurt. If I had decided to adjust a second later, I probably wouldn't be here. A car broke down in the inside lane. The car in front of me swerved out to avoid it. There was no hard shoulder. I had to swerve into the oncoming lane to avoid that car and back in to avoid the bus that was coming at me at 60 miles per hour. It was literally inches, maybe 2 feet from a head-on collision. I have never come that close to a RTA at that speed and never shaken that much when the adrenaline wore off. It is amazing how fast your reflexes are when you stop thinking and just react. Hit by a car in a foreign country. Thrown into the air, land on the ground, back of my head is bleeding and kneecap dislocated. Thought I was going to die. Thank God the country had EU healthcare so the MRIs were super cheap. Got jumped on when I was underwater at a swimming pool. The swimming pool had these giant balls for people to play with and you were not supposed to jump on them. Pool rules. Well, someone decided those rules didn't matter, and I was just out of view. Landed on top of me, and I remember gasping in lungfuls of pool water. Felt awful. In my life I've had, at least, a half dozen near-death experiences, and at least 3 of them involved those giant balls in the public pool. Well, not near death as such, but a massive mountain of a man tried to get me into his house, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have come out again if he had succeeded. So glad he wasn't able to get you into his house. Last year I didn't feel well for a few days, then intense pain, went to urgent care, they sent me to the ER, wound up in emergency surgery and a 6-day hospital stay with discharge diagnosis, ileus, ruptured appendix, COVID pneumonia and acute respiratory failure. Close as I want to come.